I would say lighting and sound are probably the two easiest and most budget-friendly changes that you can make in a house. When you do those things, just kind of the whole temperature of the house just kind of like settles. And it's really fun to hear, obviously, feedback on that.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Therapy Unmasked, brought to you by Ability Innovations. And we've got an excellent podcast for you today. We're here with Rachel. And Rachel, I'll let you introduce yourself and you can tell us a little bit more about what you do. But Rachel is amazing. And we found her through a friend of a friend of a friend, it's kind of like. So Rachel, go ahead and tell us a little bit more about you and your company.
It's great to be here. I am Rachel Jackson. I'm an interior designer and I specialize in sensory-friendly and ADHD-aware homes and spaces. How I got here, I have ADHD. My son has ADHD. And for years, I was designing spaces without realizing that a lot of the instincts that I had and that I used were kind of coming out of that place. So I've been an interior designer for about 20 years at this point, which is kind of crazy. And about 2 years ago, I had a friend who they have neurodiversity in their family. And she also runs a marketing firm. And she was like, "You have helped us. We need you to help more people. Let's look at what it means to kind of like dive into this niche." So that's kind of where I got started doing that specifically about 2 years ago.
Rachel, on your website, it talks about how you help design homes so that they help the people that you're designing them for. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So I have a pretty thorough intake process. I always have. Part of the thing is about my ADHD, if I don't have a process in place, the information doesn't stick in my head. So my intake questionnaire and all of that has been super honed and super tight throughout the years. So it's a pretty extensive kind of intake, and it really helps figure out what each family's blend of what they've got going on is. So what I've found is most of the time people are coming to me with certain frustrations around their home, and it really is traced back to one of three sensory factors, whether they're neurodiverse, neurotypical, whatever. And it's usually lighting, sound, and organization. So those are kind of the things that bring the most impact typically, and that I notice people are kind of coming to me with frustrations around.
Do you get a sense that other designers don't really focus so much on individualizing that for people?
I think that there is a lot of neurodiversity in the creative world. So I do think a lot of interior designers perhaps are dealing with this in some of their own ways and can kind of maybe that informs some of their processes. But I think we definitely didn't learn it in design school. And it's something that residentially, you may get a little bit of it in like an education, architecture for education setting. Yeah, it really is something that's not, words are not put to it. And it honestly wasn't until a few years back, I started writing some interior design guides to kind of help. There would be a subset of people that would want to hire me, but maybe they're building a house and the budget just wasn't there for me to come in and fully help. I wanted them to have some kind of a roadmap, some kind of an option. So I started writing design guides. Yeah. And when I was doing that, that was very helpful for me to really sit with my processes and kind of put words to it in a way that when you're just kind of going from project to project, it's hard to do.
You've designed some guides, and you also have some courses and different services that you offer, even professional development. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
I'll start with probably the most relevant thing for the parents listening. That would be, I do offer design services, and that kind of ranges from those DIY guides all the way to, full service. And like I said, a lot of those families are coming because something's not quite working at home. And so sometimes they're like, well, give me a design kit so that we can start with the living room and really address what's going on in there and get that space kind of figured out. So that's kind of just a virtual design roadmap that they can, they don't have to live in Austin. That's where I am. I'm in Austin. And so I'm able to help people kind of around the nation with that. And then self-paced courses. I also have that for people who are really into kind of that do it yourself. It's helpful for people to figure out their own design style and their own process. So it's very self-paced. They kind of do it as they want to. Other designers, occupational therapists, other professionals, I speak at conferences, clinics, schools, anyone or anywhere that wants to really understand the connection between, especially home environment. We know about class environment. That's where the professional development commit comes in. For interior designers, we have CEU courses, kind of continuing ed stuff. And usually designers need about 10 credit hours annually. Currently, my interior design for sensory friendly homes is credited for an hour. And then I'm working on my follow-up guide. So that'll be another hour. So you can get that. And then I'm working on a mentorship program for interior designers in 2026 to really kind of like, I only teach so many people or can only help so many people. But if I can teach other designers how to do this, then they can kind of take it into their communities.
Yeah, it totally spreads that out more.
Yeah.
That is great. I mean, there's so many things that are out there that people may not know about, but there's also so much that is needed out there. So getting those kinds of services out there for families is so great. Actually, here at Ability Innovations, we work a lot with kids that have developmental needs and are trying to reach milestones, and they have sensory disorders, and they might be part of that neurodiversity group. And there's things that they need to be able to do, and they might be restricted by their environments. So are there like quick tips that you would give parents to help their kids when their kids might have some of those neurodiversity challenges, to be able to help mediate some of those through the environment that they're in?
Some of the biggest things you can do is taking their sensitivity seriously. I didn't know to do that as much when I was, especially my son he was about 4 or 5 when he started school. And I think that's probably when a lot of their sensitivities come up. And if, they're a different sensory profile than you, it can kind of be like, what do I even do with this? And luckily now we have, OT is so common, and it wasn't 17, 18 years ago when Jackson, was just going into school. There's a story that I kind of look back on, and it was how I got him ankle socks, because when I was a kid, ankle socks were the cool socks. And I was like, he'll go to school with his new ankle socks. What I remember from that morning is there was a lot of crying. It was because his shoe now touched a certain spot on his ankle that was previously covered by the crew socks, the tall socks, right? I didn't know that. So I think, and I say this about design in general, slowing down and really, and I'm sure y'all talk about this with your clients too, understanding that emotion is just communication. Like, what is trying to be communicated here? Maybe that's a sensory seeking kid, and they need to pull all the cushions off the couch, and they need to build forts, and they need to jump, and floor is lava type games. And then maybe there's siblings or parents who are sensory avoiders and need those quiet spaces. But childhood it's kind of the season. So we're here for a certain time, and kids develop and grow and kind of, go into their phases of, what they can tolerate. Looking at your house as a place that the rooms don't necessarily have to be used for what they're supposed to be used for. For instance, I worked with a family, and they had I think they had like 5 kids, and they were all in that like preteen to teenage age group. So lots of noise, lots of stuff. And they needed just kind of a quieter space. And what we did is we turned their dining room, that was rarely used, but it was a large amount of square footage. We turned their dining room, brought their family room into that. And where their family room was, which was just off the kitchen, turned that into the dining room, because their breakfast area, they had outgrown it. And so they didn't really have enough like dining space for everybody. Anyway, it was just kind of a mesh. And so we were able to get them kind of a relaxed, enjoyable kind of out of the way family room by making that switch, by then putting their dining room where their old family room was, and kind of opening that up to this, chaotic kitchen dining area. There's lots of solutions, and each family is unique. But I would say looking at kind of what your bottlenecks are, where your frustrations are, and being okay with like the house not being exactly how it's supposed to be for this season.
Yeah, that's interesting that you start with kind of this bottleneck or this problem area. And then you say, okay, what can we shift a little bit? Even though it's not meant for that, but what can we shift to kind of help mediate that? That's interesting.
And again, that's where that kind of intake questionnaire process comes in. Like there's a lot of just a general interior design intake, and then there's kind of a separate sensory intake that I do, and kind of getting all that information and marrying it together. We've come up with some really interesting solutions as a result.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like it's a really fun process. And I think too, it's like after you get done with a family and you've set up something new for them and then they're trying it out, how much response do you get back about how that might have affected them?
Well, that is actually kind of how this niche was born. My friend, we're on a business retreat, and my question to the group was completely different than kind of the direction it ended up going. But she spoke to that exactly. She's like, don't underestimate the impact you have on families. My husband and I get irritated with my husband less. But after you came in and organized his office and organized the kitchen and took care of some things, because he has ADHD, and he was able to just kind of, stay a little more organized and not leave things everywhere as much. And I'm now kind of being able to just, so that was probably one of the more dramatic responses I got from a client, because she's also my friend. But definitely the calming, we now can, after some changes, and again, I would say lighting and sound are probably the two easiest and most budget-friendly changes that you can make in a house. When you do those things, just kind of the whole temperature of the house just kind of like settles. And it's really fun to hear, obviously, feedback on that.
I'm sure we've got like listeners at home that are going, oh, I've got to call this lady. And we totally need that. I can see that happening. I was going to ask you too, at the bottom of your website, there's it says that you're making homes work for everybody in mind. And what does that statement mean to you and your brand personally?
Yeah. So there's, when I was first getting into this niche, I was trying to understand like who else was out there doing this? What are they doing? And there was not a lot, definitely in the US. There's this wonderful architecture professor, Magda Mustafa, and she was on a podcast. I was listening to it, and her response was to a question kind of similar was, when we design for autism, we design for everyone. And she primarily does work for autistic education centers, residential facilities, and that kind of thing. And same thing, when she went into that, was hired for a project like that, there just was not a lot that was being done in this area. I take that, and it really is when you lower the visual noise in a room, when you've got parents that are overwhelmed, when you address these things, it's not just better for the kid with ADHD, it's better for everybody. My broader take on her thought is, when we design for everyone, everyone wins. Like, we're not just doing this for the people who have sensory issues. Like, people who would not consider themselves sensory challenged always love the result, and they're like, oh, this is nice. When we think about like sitting in a restaurant, you've got kind of fast casual, Chipotle, whatever, and you go and sit in a nice steak restaurant, the difference in lighting, the difference in acoustics, it's a totally different feel. Not that we're trying to make home a steak restaurant, but it's used commercially. All of these design is already used to alter and impact psychology commercially. So we're just harnessing it for the home, which is really cool.
I used to work in the schools, and there was this idea of universal design for living. And that was kind of this hot topic. And it's kind of up this same alley of them saying, if we design something like an audio system for kids that are hard of hearing, then it can be used for everybody. And all the kids can have amplified sound coming from the teacher, and it will help everybody. It's universal. And I love that idea. I love that that's going into architecture and design and all of those things, because you're right. It helps everybody, especially in that family.
Yeah, it does. And I am seeing it. So my son is currently in college at Texas State down the road in San Marcos. And I was on one of the parent Facebook group. And they had the it was an overlapping course taught by a professor of psychology and a design school professor. And they were doing a course on this exact thing, like basically how to design for, and they put it's a very broad topic. It was, I think, for mental health. So they're taking in like anxiety and depression alongside, neurodiversity. It is being taught. It's out there. And I think kids who have been learning, social and emotional learning for the last decade or so, they're the ones who are coming up, bringing this into the, kind of Gen Z group. And they're like, guys, we need to think about this on a broader scale. So it's really cool watching that happen.
So you're kind of a forerunner, and there's going to be all these people carrying torches.
I hope so. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Well, it sounds so amazing. And I love that you're doing this work, and it's such a powerful thing that you're doing and offering families. Are there any parting words or parting ideas that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Like I had mentioned, the biggest three things are sound and acoustics, lighting, and like visual overwhelm. So with lighting, a lot of people don't realize that recessed lights that the builders installed are usually like daylight light bulbs. So when you've got those on at 10 a.m., it's fine. But when you're using all overheads at 8 p.m., that's messing with your melatonin production. So I would say the biggest thing I tell people that you can do pretty much immediately, even if you have to go out and buy some lamps, move to lamp light in the evenings. So kind of try to move away from overhead. Yeah. And any light bulbs. If you want to get real nerdy in this, I have a little like cheat sheet. When I tell people to go get light bulbs, make sure it's like 2,700 to 3,000 kelvins. And that's like, there's a little nutritional label on the light bulb box.
The back of the boxes or
the back of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to stay to that warm. Don't do daylight because that really, it's messing with your melatonin production. Those of us with ADHD, we usually have a hard time sleeping as it is, so we don't need to add to that. Move to warm lamplight in the evenings and really embrace like sound machines in bedrooms. Do not underestimate rugs and what they do for the acoustics of the home. It can really be loud and echoey. And I know we've got dogs, we've got kids, and so rugs can be kind of difficult to maintain, but there's some great, Ruggable offers washable rugs, things like that. But that really is going to turn down the acoustic temperature in the home.
Much sound is bouncing around. Yeah.
Totally. Yes. And the last one is, and this one, it can get a little bit more expensive, addressing the visual overwhelm and the clutter. Again, going back to those bottlenecks, where do things tend to pile up? And I have a method that I use with clients. I'm not a professional organizer. In fact, I've hired one before because I needed it in my own closet. If you can get everything into piles, it's my 4 piles method. And it's price, resell it, pass, donate it or recycle it, place, it's what you're going to keep, and then pitch is what you need to throw away. And what's cool is after you work through those piles, you really just have to manage what you're keeping. And that can kind of help.
Declutter.
And that overwhelm. Exactly. So yeah, those would be my 3 things. And I will make sure you have the link to, I have an intro workshop on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and it goes through all of my main like highlights of all these areas. So they don't have to remember everything I said today.
Great. We'll put that link in. Thank you, Rachel. Those tips are amazing. And I hope that our listeners at home go and check out all this stuff. And you might even be getting some calls because you've piqued my interest and sparked my imagination with that. So I'm sure that there's listeners at home with the same. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing what you do with us and how you help all of the children and the families that have children with disabilities or neurodiversity. And I mean, if we can make the world a better place in lots of different ways, we're doing it right.
Well, thank you so much. I loved being here, and I think we're all doing great work. So thanks for all that y'all do too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, that wraps it up here for Therapy Unmasked, brought to you by Ability Innovations. And if you want to come and check out more of what we do and check out those links that we're going to put in the bottom, check out Rachel Jackson and all that she does. And we will see you next time on Therapy Unmasked.